Hello and welcome to episode 38 of Mad Knitting. This is a YouTube channel mostly about knitting, occasionally about other crafts, and whatever else I feel like talking about that relates to those things. My name is Susan. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am coming to you from Madison, Wisconsin, where I live and work. Today is Monday, April the 17th, 2023, and it is currently snowing. We've had kind of a roller coaster time with the weather over the last couple of weeks. And last week we had record high temperatures. It felt like summer and it was so dry that there were wildfires popping up in different parts of the state. And last night through this morning, we had a winter weather advisory. So, you know, as the saying goes, if you don't like the weather, just wait a few minutes and it will change. And that is certainly true. So I was in the mood today to do an episode, even though I have quite a lot happening in my work and my life. But I don't know, maybe something about the snow just felt like a good day to take a break from work and talk about wool for a little while. This is not a regular episode. Normally, I follow the typical formula of sharing finished objects and works in progress and maybe some things coming up. But instead today, I'm going to do a bit of a stash flash. It will not be my whole stash. And I've explained why I will never show my whole stash on this channel. I've decided to do some special stash episodes, kind of interspersed with regular episodes. And my first one was at the end of January. And in that one, I explained at a little more length about why I won't ever share my whole stash here. It's large, which is kind of embarrassing. And it's also stored in big weatherproof tubs that are not very appealing for the camera. And that's just why. But April is Flash Your Stash month, or at least April 1st is Flash Your Stash Day, I think. That's been like a thing on the internet for a while. I don't know who started it or when, but I think it's been around for quite a while, like since the days of blogging, you know, from the aughts. And, you know, seems like a good time to share some of what I've got. So I'm particularly interested today in talking about some yarns that I've acquired locally or from like small producers at festivals, because those are some of the most fun to find, and I think sometimes they're the most interesting to learn about. And also, it being April now, it is just the very beginning of the growing season in southern Wisconsin, and something about anticipating all the local food you can get and thinking about all the parallels between local food and agriculture and local yarn and small batch yarn and stuff just seems like a good fit for today. So I'm going to start out actually by talking a little bit about local food and the parallels that I have observed between those two movements. I want to say right off the bat that I am not an expert. I am not a historian in local food. This is not something I have studied extensively, but it is something that I've read a lot about and been interested in for a long time and participated in for quite a while now. So I am somewhat qualified to talk about it. If I miss anything big or neglect some major point that you think I should have made, please let me know in the comments and I will certainly follow up in a future episode to talk about it. So I just want to start out by saying that my understanding of the local food movement, and by that I'm talking about produce mainly, produce like, you know, vegetables, fruits. There are also other things, meats and cheeses and things, but things you can get from a region of your home, you know, maybe with a 50 or 100 mile radius. I'm talking about farmers markets, community gardens, community supported agriculture, which is a subscription model where you pay a certain amount of money to a farm at the beginning of the season and you get a weekly delivery of vegetables or bi-weekly delivery of vegetables and other things from that farm. That is what I'm talking about. And that model, or those different models of local food, really started to come into being in the mid-1990s, from the way I understand it. it's not that the local food movement began in the mid-1990s. There was certainly a lot happening before that and other movements going on, but the way that people started responding to concerns about use of pesticides, large corporate farms, and this very large corporate approach to land management and agriculture is how we got to the local food movement we've got now. So my own experience with this is, first of all, having lived in Madison since the year 2000, I happen to live in an area that is one of the best places in the country to live if you're interested in locally procured food, in particular produce, but there's quite a lot of like meat and dairy and egg producers as well. We have one of the largest concentrations of like small organic farms and family farms in the country, like where you can get vegetables. And we're actually kind of spoiled here for the number of options for community supported agriculture, CSA subscriptions. And we've had one for at least 15 years now, our household. So my interest in this really started in the early 2000s when a really good friend of mine in grad school recommended a book to me called This Organic Life by Joan Di Gusso. And that author is, I believe, a trained dietitian. And the book, I wish I had looked up the year it came out. I'm thinking like very late 90s or early 2000s. But it's basically a memoir of this woman who, with her husband, they purchased a property on the Hudson River and decided to see if they could grow all of their own produce for a year. And she really laid out all these reasons that you should be eating local produce. There are environmental reasons, of course, because of the amount of fossil fuels it takes to grow and then transport vegetables from large farms that are far away. But there were also some other things she talked about too, like just the flavor. Things taste better when they grow nearby or when you grow them yourself. So I read that book, and for me, it was literally life-changing. When I was growing up, we had a backyard garden. My grandparents were farmers, and they had this huge garden in their own, like even after they moved to a retirement village, they basically turned their entire backyard into a garden. So having fresh vegetables that you grow yourself was not like a new concept for me, but thinking of food acquisition in any kind of like environmental or social or political terms was kind of new for me. It was kind of mind-blowing. And after I read that book, I got a community garden plot with my friend. I started shopping at the farmer's market when I could afford to, and we have the country's biggest outdoor farmers market here in Dane County. It goes all the way around the Capitol Square. That's not the one I go to, but because it is so big and overwhelming. But if you're ever in Madison and you're visiting anytime between like May and October and you're here on a Saturday morning, I absolutely recommend you go to the Dane County Farmers Market at the Capitol Square. It is incredible, not to be missed. If you're local, you probably go to one of the smaller satellite markets around town where parking is easier and where things aren't quite as expensive, and you can get in and out a lot quicker, but I digress. So I read this book and it totally changed my view on how I was shopping for food. Like even as a grad student on a grad student budget, I was rethinking what I was buying and where. But the thing is with that book, I haven't read it since then, so it's been like more than 20 years since I've read it, but I have to say that from what I can remember of it, I probably would only give it like a 3.5 out of 5-star rating, because she really doesn't address the kind of systemic inequities that make it really difficult for people to access fresh food if they're not of a particular socioeconomic status. She just doesn't really talk about that. And it comes off as kind of preachy too. Like, I remember after I read it, I felt really guilty, like every time I ate an orange or drank a cup of coffee, because these are things that clearly could not grow here. And I sort of felt like I shouldn't be eating them. Well, a few years after that book, Barbara Kingsolver wrote Animal Vegetable Miracle. That came out in 2007. I actually did look this one up. And I believe 10 years later, there was like a 10th anniversary edition that came out with some extra stuff by some members of her family. And that book is fantastic. I mean, Barbara Kingsolver, if you've been watching me for a while, you may know that she is one of my very favorite writers ever. And that book is one of her best. It's a year memoir, again, of her family producing as much of their own food. It wasn't just vegetables, as they could in a year, and acquiring things as locally as they could. But it's so beautifully written, and she does talk about systemic issues with the food system and inequities in it. So definitely worth reading that one. Plus, it's just so beautifully written that it's a good read, whether or not you actually take anything from it into your own practice. She also, as I recall, and again, it's been many years since I've read it, but as I recall, at the very beginning, she starts off saying, this is not meant as an instruction manual for the rest of you. She acknowledges that she has many resources available to her that other people don't. She has time, she has economic resources, they have land where they could like raise animals and grow a lot of their own produce. They have skills, like all this stuff in place that not everybody has, but she actually talks about that in the book too. So that's a lot of preamble, but that's all to say that the local food movement was really taking off in the early 2000s. I think that the internet helped that along. The response to September 11 sent a lot of people. I lived through that. I wasn't in New York. I was here in Madison when that happened, but that was so earth-shattering for us, that event, 9/11. And I think that one of the long-term effects was that a lot of us were thinking more about kind of staying closer to home and building up our own community and just trying to reconnect with each other. And this sounds so woo, but really it sort of shook up our notion of globalism, I guess, and like our place in the world. And like, we just literally needed to feel more grounded, and somehow acquiring food locally or growing your own food and getting in touch a little bit with that part of life, and with, how do I say this? Well, you're working within the sphere of what you can control, right? So if I have some control over what I am bringing into my home to feed myself and my family, then I feel a little more secure. So I think that and the availability of local food, and more farmers markets being established, and community gardens and CSA possibilities and all of that stuff just kind of made it all come together. Now, what does that have to do with yarn? Well, I think that, I don't know that if it was happening perfectly in parallel, but I think that there are a lot of parallels with local food and how that has grown, and with local yarn and small batch fiber and sheep to skein, that whole idea. I sort of feel like maybe the fiber part of it, at least in terms of broader understanding or catching on in for a more mainstream audience, maybe that was a few years behind. But I've seen a lot of it, and I think there is an emphasis, like there's a lot of the same reasons behind it, right? Like people wanting to connect with the producers of this product that they're using or consuming somehow, and with a desire to support small producers and think more locally and more regionally, all of that stuff. The other thing is that in the early and mid 2000s, again, partly in response to 9/11 and partly for other reasons, there was a huge resurgence in knitting. It started to become a lot more popular. And between that factor and also the internet, which made all kinds of things much more available. Suddenly you could order things online, you could find patterns online. There were blogs. Blogs were a huge thing in the mid 2000s, and I think all of that just kind of helped it along. So you've heard me go on and on about local food and just a little bit about local yarn. And I want to talk a little bit about where you find yarn locally. I think that there's no point in me talking too much about fiber festivals because the big ones everybody knows about, and I haven't actually been to those. So I'm thinking primarily of the New York Sheep and Wool Festival at Rhinebeck, Maryland Sheep and Wool. Those are the two biggest ones that come to mind. But there are also times when you can find like these little festivals, or you can find stuff at farmers markets. So I'm going to share just a few of the things in my stash that I have found locally that have felt like, I don't know, it's kind of like a treasure hunt sometimes to find these things. So I'm going to start with festivals actually. So I think one of the reasons that festivals have grown in popularity, I think one of the reasons that Rhinebeck has just exploded is because probably the internet, like blogs and then eventually social media, just made it more possible for knitters and fiber enthusiasts to connect with each other online. And as we know, social media in particular tends to really blur those boundaries between like your online people and your offline people, and a lot of times those rivers are crossing, and that's fine. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but we have lots of people that go just to meet up with their friends. There are knitting celebrities that draw a crowd. I'm not here to make a judgment on that either way, but you can't deny that it is a huge draw to places like Rhinebeck and Maryland Sheep and Wool. Now, Wisconsin has our own Sheep and Wool Festival, and for me, it is just the right size. I do enjoy going to that festival. It is held on the Jefferson County Fairgrounds every September. So for me, it's like an hour's drive, maybe a little less. So one of the nice things about it is that I can decide to go on the day of. There's no need to like book a hotel or make a lot of arrangements. And I've been a handful of times. The first time was when my kids were really, really little and we decided to go as a family and take a day trip out there. And it was okay. Like, it was kind of hot and everybody got tired and ready to leave before I was really ready to leave. But we saw sheep, we saw sheepdogs. I walked to the vendor barns and it was fine. And since then, it was a few years before I went again, but since then I've gone a couple years in a row with a friend of mine who has since moved out of state. And then I've gone once or twice completely alone by myself. And I have to say that is the best because I'm accountable to nobody but myself. I can sit down and rest whenever I want to. I can have a snack when I'm hungry. I can spend as much or as little time looking at the sheep, watching the sheepdog trials, walking through the vendor barns. It's great. So the last time I went was actually in 2019, I guess. No, 2021. I went a couple years ago. So 2020, it was canceled. 2021, I went. Last year, I couldn't go. But 2 years ago when I went, I bought yarn that did go, that still I've knit into several projects, and then there's some that I still haven't knit yet, actually. So one of those projects was the sweater that I'm wearing. This is the paper doll sweater. It's a design by Kate Davies. And the yarn I used is like not locally milled at all, but it was locally dyed. It's Sun Valley fibers, it's fingering tweed, it's superwash and nylon and tweed. And this is how much I have left. It's probably enough for a whole other sweater. I think what I should do is weigh the sweater that I'm wearing and weigh the yarn that I have left and compare the two and just see. Because I really like how these colors go together. So this is one project from that trip to the Wisconsin Sheep and Wool Festival. And I'm very happy with it. Another project I have from yarn that I bought at that festival, which I've also shared on this channel before, so I won't go into great detail, is this shawl. You can kind of see a color theme going on here, can't you? I didn't notice that till now. This is called Some Me Time. It's by Hohi Locatelli. And the yarn I use, the cream yarn, the undyed yarn, is 100% Polworth that I got from Round Barn Mill. They had a stand there, or a booth at the Sheep and Wool Festival. And then later I supplemented it with these colors from Utopia. This is Ridge Fingering, which also had a booth at the Fiber Festival, but I bought this later online. But I used every last bit of that Polworth and just about every last bit of this Ridge Fingering. And this is one of my favorite shawls. It's a good size, and it's light and warm and stays on. I think if it was any bigger, it would be in the way. If it was any smaller, then it would be falling off all the time. So 2 successful projects from that Fiber Festival. Now I have yarn that I bought there that I still, a third one, I just remembered. I have everything in laundry baskets down here, so I have to lean over and pick it up. All right, this is a pair of socks using some sock yarn I bought at the festival. And I made these for my son. I think the yarn is from Bumblebee Acres. And I probably showed these on the channel when I made them. I don't remember exactly. When I knit these up, it was probably for Christmas that year. So at fiber festivals, you will find both like commercial yarn that has been dyed by a small company, for example, what I'm wearing or these socks, or you will find like smaller mills that are vending. Or I suppose you would find like farmers and they're selling the yarn or fiber that is from their own sheep. But the purchases that I made were from both independent dyeing companies and also from mills. So I'll just show you the unused yarn from Round Barn Fiber Mill is this. I have 2 skeins of this beautiful gray yarn that will, there we go. It is 60% merino and 40% alpaca, 300 yards for 4 ounces. So I have quite a lot. I have 2 skeins of it, and it's a DK weight. And I haven't decided exactly what to do with it. I think when I bought it, I was thinking like a hat and cowl and mitts or mittens, and that maybe I would try and design something, but designing is a lot of work, and I'm not sure that that's what I'm going to do now, but it feels really, really soft and warm, and I think it will make a really lovely set of accessories. So that's my plan with this someday. I want to show you some yarn that I got ages ago at the Wisconsin Sheep and Wool Festival that I still have not knit. Like, it's kind of embarrassing how long I've had this. This might have been, honestly, you know how I said we went when my kids were really little? They're now in high school. And they were like tiny when we went. And this might be from that trip. And I still haven't made it. I can't find the tags, but I know that this is DK weight, like merino and angora. There's a little bit of angora in this. So you can see a little bit of a halo in the yarn. It's very, very soft. And I have 1 skein each of this cream and the red and several of the gray. And my plan when I bought it, and my plan still, is to make the Clayquat, I don't know how to say it, a cardigan by Tin Can Knits that has some color work at the bottom and around the yoke, and I think at the end of the sleeves, and you cut a steek to make it a cardigan. So it's knit in the round and then cut to make a cardigan. And I love that design, and I saw this yarn, I thought it'd be perfect. And I think one of the reasons that I haven't done it yet is because I'm a little nervous that the Angora content in this is gonna shed and be kind of a problem. So I just keep putting it off and knitting other things. But I haven't sold or given away the yarn, I still have it. So, maybe one of these days I will make it. So that is not an exhaustive list of every bit of yarn that I have bought at that festival, but it gives you an idea of the kinds of things that I shop for. I sometimes will buy hand-dyed yarn, but I'm particularly looking for small mills or, maybe breed specific. I don't know much about specific breeds, but it's really interesting to see what smaller producers have for you, okay? Now, what I'm really good at though is finding yarn at farmers markets. There is just something that amuses me to no end about going to the farmers market, ostensibly to shop for food, and finding yarn there. So a really good example of this is, I've shown you this sweater before. I'll show you the sweater. So the winter market a few years ago, that didn't even have that many vendors, but there was one, amongst like the potatoes and the preserves and, all the things that you can find in a winter market. There was a guy there who had 100% Corriedale yarn, and it was very reasonable priced. I don't even know where it was milled, but it was beautiful. So I bought 5 skeins, and I eventually used it for this test knit, which is called Epernay, and it's by Thea Coleman, and it's a beautiful sweater, and unfortunately I don't wear it very often. I think it's because the shape is a little outside my wheelhouse, and I just haven't quite figured out how to style it. So it's a little bit boxy. I knit it less cropped than the original version because I don't do cropped. I'm over 40, and I don't wear dresses. And I don't know how else you'd wear a crop sweater except like over a dress or because you want your belly showing. So anyway, but it's kind of wide and boxy, and the main issue is that the neckline is just way too big. So I think I might pull out the neckline and redo it, like drop down to a really small needle size just so that it holds its shape a little better and doesn't spread out so much. I don't know yet, but the cables on this are beautiful, and it's a beautiful sweater and a beautiful knit, so I would like to find ways to wear it more often. There's quite a bit of the yarn left. I have at least a whole skein. But you can see just how lovely it is. I think this is 2-ply, this DK weight, and it's just a real pleasure to work with. Really nice to work with. So that's not the only yarn I have found at farmers markets. Here's a skein that has no label. I'm pretty sure this is alpaca. It feels like alpaca. It has that softness and that sort of lack of elasticity that you have in wool. And it's this beautiful dark brown. And I don't know what to make with it. I don't have a label. I don't know how much is in here, or like what the gauge is or anything, but one day this will probably become a nice pair of mittens or a hat. I have a lot of like 1 or 2 skein things that I bought thinking someday this will become a pair of mittens or a hat. Like, how many mittens and hats does a person need, I ask you? Even in Wisconsin, I think I might be reaching the point where I have too many hats. But that's a topic for another day. Now, one last batch of farmers market yarn to show you. And this is a big one. This is one of my favorite vendors who has since retired. This really, really lovely woman with a beautiful English accent had a farm called Yorkshire Rose. And she was a regular at the Wednesday morning market that I used to go to all the time with my kids when they were really little. And she was so lovely and her yarn was so pretty that I would just come home with a few skeins of it sometimes when I would go. So here is a label I've made some stuff and I'll show you one of the things that I've made. So like here's a label. R&R stands for Ramble and Romney. So she would sell natural colored and then stuff that she had hand dyed. And it wasn't like you could not, I don't think you could like buy her stuff online. There was not enough of it. And she didn't have the capacity for like a whole shop, but she would sell it at the market. And I did see her at the Sheep and Wool Festival too with the booth. But there would be natural colors and then there would be hand dyed colors. And she had pure Ramble, which is soft, soft, soft like merino, and pure Romney, which is like a long wool that is very hard wearing, and then a blend, which would be like half of each. So I have some of everything. I'm going to show you the Ramble first, if I can find it. When my daughter was really little, yellow was absolutely her favorite color. And I bought a skein of this, and I made her a scarf, and I made her a hat. I'm trying to remember if I made her a pair of mittens. I can't remember. And I don't have those anymore. I'm pretty sure I gave them away to another little kid, but I'll see if I can find a picture at least of the hat and put it in here. But this is just the brightest, sunniest yellow. I mean, it was just perfect for her at the time. Now she's a teenager and she wears a lot of black, sometimes navy, nothing like this. But I have this little bit of it left and it's really, really nice. It's kind of soft and bouncy, but I don't think it pills quite like merino. So Ramble is good stuff. I also have some of her 100% Romney. I'm going to show you two projects I've made with that. So this you've seen before, and these are well worn. I made these mittens last year out of 100% Romney that I held with some mohair silk to make them extra warm. This is the Antler Mittens by Tin Can Knits. And I wear them a lot, and you can tell that they're wearing really well. There's not a whole lot of fuzz. You know, mittens get used pretty hard, and they are holding up pretty well for a year. They're not as warm as I expected. It's like I need to wear if it's really, really cold outside, it's like I need to wear a pair of liner gloves underneath to help cut the wind. But still, I'm very happy with these mittens. The first thing I made, though, was a pair of mittens for my husband. This is also 100% Romney from Yorkshire Rose, and it's undyed. And I made these, I don't know, 5 years ago, maybe? Quite a while ago. And they have just held up beautifully. I think these even went through the washing machine once accidentally. Like I pulled them out of the machine, this is a few years ago, and I thought, oh no, they've been washed. But you know what? They didn't felt. They maybe have a little bit of fuzz, but they haven't shrunk at all. And they held their shape and they've just held up really nicely. So Romney is not something, I'm not super sensitive to wool, but I don't think I could wear Romney next to my neck. Maybe if I had a cardigan or something that was always going to be worn over another shirt, I could wear it. But pure Romney it's a little on the scratchy side, but for mittens, yes please, it's really great. Now, I also have a sweater's worth of this R&R blend. And I have several colors, and it's supposedly sport weight, but when I swatched it, I was getting like 5 stitches to the inch, kind of no matter what I did. So I'm mulling over, I mean, I've had this yarn for several years, and I'm kind of mulling over what I would make with it. But I'll show you the colors I've got. So there's this natural dark brown. I have a few skeins of this. There's also this beautiful, like, well, she names her colors. What is this called? Heather Turkey Red. Gorgeous. I love this shade of red. I also have a natural white, just one of these. Okay. I have a kind of a sky blue. Right, so I've got these colors, and I don't know if I'll combine them all into a color work something or other, or use them in different projects. But I'm thinking sweater with color work on it for sure. But I expect this will be wearable because of the Ramble and very hard wearing because of the Romney. And I've had this forever and I just can't decide what pattern to knit, which is why I just hang on to it and I don't knit it. I won't know until I go back and edit this video, but I've had to film it in pieces because of my work schedule and other demands on my day. So it's possible that the angle has changed slightly and that the light has been changing throughout the video. So in case you're wondering, which you're probably not, that's why. So where I left off, I was showing you some Romney and Ramble yarn from Yorkshire Rose that I intend to combine somehow into a colorwork sweater project. I don't know if I will include all of these colors or what. I have some ideas, but once I do that, I'll be sure to let you know. Before I move on to another like company or business, I just wanted to show you some of the 100% Romney yarn that I have purchased from her because, like I said, like I love visiting her booth when it was there, and I just would like pick up a skein here and there every once in a while. So I do have more 100% Romney yarn, like I have made mittens out of, and I'll just show you what I've got. I have some, is this 100% Romney? I have some natural white color, and I have these 3 dyed colors. So this one is called Reseda Green. It's a really beautiful kind of pine spruce green. This is a lavender color. And obviously this is blue, but I lost the label, so I don't know what it's called. And I don't have plans to combine these. I don't think these work very well in combination anyway. But they're such sturdy, hard-wearing yarns that I should make these into mittens because I think they'll be very handy to have around and will last a long time. And you know, mittens do wear out. Mittens and socks, I find, do wear out because you wear them hard. They have to be washed. So it's good to have several pairs of those. Now, one fun discovery I had a few years ago was I was stopping at this one stand that's really known for their goat cheese, and they also have eggs. But every once in a while, when I would go to that stand at the Saturday morning market that I go to on a regular basis, they had some skeins of Jacob wool just over to the side, not very many. And they must just raise Jacob sheep for the fun of it. I don't really know. But I ended up coming home with about 3 different colors one day. It's like DK weight. Jacob wool is it a long wool? I'm not sure. It's not the softest yarn, but it's very hard wearing. So it's maybe not quite as long as Romney. But anyway, so I came home with Jacob wool and I made eventually, took a while to settle on a pattern, but eventually I made this shawl, which is called Alexandria. It is by Hoki Locatelli, and her version has a bunch of fringe on the edge, and I opted not to do that because I don't know, I'm just not into fringe, and it seemed like a lot of work, and I'm already kind of messy and shawls get in my way, and if I had like more things dangling down, I just could see that being a problem. So I just didn't add the fringe. But this is using all natural colors, which is pretty cool. I think it's really cool how Jacob wool comes in a variety of colors. So this very dark, the very light, and then this is sort of a medium, more of a gray than cream. So this shawl is knit from the top out, and there's like a garter tab cast on. And you can see there's a bunch of increases, and it's basically garter stitch until you get to the border, which is this really cool mosaic pattern. That was really fun to work. I enjoyed doing that. For some reason though, I had trouble with the edge, and I don't know if adding fringe would have fixed this. I have two problems with this shawl actually. One is that the edge wanted to flip up. Somehow adding a few rows of garter was not enough to keep it from curling up on the mosaic section, which is in stockinette. So this is the knit side of the mosaic section, and this is the back side, and you can see the rest of the shawl and garter is pretty much, you know, what do you call it? Reversible. But it was so annoying, even after like really aggressive blocking, it was flipping up. So I ended up taking out that bind off edge and adding a few rows of, I think it was like I just added some plain stockinette stitches in. I kind of I have some columns of knit stitches, so it wasn't totally garter. And I'm not sure why that worked, but it did. So that doesn't flip up anymore. The other problem is this top part. It does not want to lie flat. You either get kind of a hump at the top, or there's like a pocket that it creates. So you either have this part sticking up, or you have to fold it over kind of like a collar, which for some reason I find really annoying. I never wear this out. This is such a large shawl. I mean, it's not that deep, but it's really, really long that I tend to just wrap it around me when I'm home and I really need a warm layer. Like when I'm working, it's actually long enough I can do the thing where you tie it around your waist like they do in Little Women. I don't know if you guys have seen that, the latest version of Little Women from a few years ago, but they wear shawls like this a lot. And I have not done this very carefully, so it's all wonky, but it's really great for keeping me warm at home. I don't necessarily wear it out because of these little annoyances, like with the top of it. But this was a great way to use up that Jacob yarn. When I was done with the shawl, I still had some of it left, and I made the most fun little projects. I'm going to show you. This was a gift for my daughter just a few years ago, and it was just pure fun. They are little cats. The pattern is called Cat Stack because you literally make it, it gives you instructions for 3 different sizes, and they're designed to be round, but like round one way, but kind of flat at the top and bottom so that you can stack them up. And it was so much fun to make these. So I just used up what I had left. I think, obviously I had enough of the dark left for a small one, and I had to stripe in some of the light color for this medium one. And I found deep in my stash tub an unfinished large cat, and this one just did not work. You cast on garter and you do short rows and then you sew it up and stuff it, and for some reason this one just had like a very prominent nipple, for lack of a better way to describe it, sticking up at the top, and I wasn't sure how to remedy that. it wasn't really, it wasn't an issue on the medium and small size, obviously. So I don't know if it's an issue with the way the pattern is written or if my gauge just was off somehow so that the short rows were too close to the end, causing it to pucker up. I don't know. But for whatever reason, I abandoned it and I haven't come back to it. So I've got this little bit of the Jacob wool left. And maybe I'll figure it out someday. But anyway, the cat stack. I recommend at least the small and medium sizes. It's a very entertaining pattern and it's very cute. So anyway, those are the projects that I have to share with you. This is not all the yarn that I have from local festivals and farmers markets and things, but I don't want this to go on any longer. And maybe I'll share some more bits here and there during my regular episodes. This is at least an inspiration for me to use this yarn. One of the nice things about doing these stash flash, stash talks, I don't really know what to call the segment or to call this series yet, but it is motivating me to use up this yarn, just going through it, seeing what I have, remembering how fun it was to find these different yarns at festivals and markets and things, is a good impetus to use them. So that's all I have for today. My next episode will be a regular one and I'll have finished objects and works in progress to share. But until then, happy knitting and happy spring.